So that's the first time I laid eyes on Joe Kernan. He was looked like a prisoner of war. I mean, he was
Wow, really?
very thin,
Yeah.
but he had a good arm, and
Yeah.
it was a real good first pitch.
Uh-huh.
And I really didn't know anything about him at that time.
Yeah.
Our coach, Jake Klein, who he had played for,
Uh-huh.
turned around and said to our team, "That's a real American hero right there."
You heard that there. That's Dick Nussbaum, a close friend and colleague of former South Bend Mayor Joe Kernan, sharing the story of the very first time that they met. More of that later, but first, thank you for listening to another episode of Round the Bend Now and Then. My name is Matt Emery, and I'm a local history nerd. My main mission in this podcast, as well as other Round the Bend material, is to create engaging content that shares how intertwined the South Bend and Mishawaka area's past is to our present. In the podcast, I interview local leaders, business owners, and community members to help tell their stories, because their stories help tell the story of South Bend and Mishawaka. When I think about notable names in South Bend from my childhood, Joe Kernan is right at the top of the list. He became mayor when I was 9 years old and served until I was 18. Along with being the mayor of South Bend, he was Indiana's lieutenant governor and governor. He was a Navy pilot and a prisoner of war during Vietnam who came home and chose public service over comfort. But beyond all of that, he was simply Joe, a South Bend neighbor who never let the titles define him. And today's episode is about that man. I had the privilege of sitting down with Dick Nussbaum, Joe's longtime friend, advisor, and city attorney during his years as mayor, lieutenant governor, and governor. And the stories you're about to hear is from such a unique perspective. It's stories from someone who was in the room when big decisions were made, and who also knew Joe when the cameras and all the South Bend news reporters weren't around. Dick so eloquently describes not only their professional relationship, but also their friendship. Through his eyes, we get a clear picture of what drove Joe, how he handled pressure, and why Joe Kernan is South Bend, Indiana through and through. Thank you, Dick, for joining us and sharing your fond memories of a South Bend legend. Before we dive into the interview, I want to express my sincere thanks to the sponsors of this episode, MT Box Computers and the Portage Township Trustee Office. I am so very appreciative of your support. And now, my interview with Dick Nussbaum reflecting on the life and legacy of Joe Kernan. In this episode, I'm honored to sit down with Dick Nussbaum, who worked closely with Joe Kernan as South Bend city attorney. And more importantly, you remained a trusted friend for his life. And so I want to do an episode focused on Joe Kernan, and what better person than to meet with you. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for being able to do this. It's a great part of my life, and I'm happy to share it with your listeners.
Awesome. That's cool. All right. Well, hey, let's take it back to the beginning. When and how did you first meet Joe Kernan?
Well, it actually was in the spring of 1973, and I was playing baseball at Notre Dame.
Uh-huh.
And we were at a game, getting ready to take the field, and many times there's a ceremonial first pitch.
Yes.
And Joe had been shot down over Vietnam in May 8th of 1972. And the reason I know that is because every May 8th he celebrated a shoot-down day.
Wow.
So that's when he was shot down. He was a prisoner of war for 11 months, which meant that he was released in April. And probably shortly thereafter, he came back to campus and he threw out the first pitch.
Wow.
So that's the first time I laid eyes on Joe Kernan. He looked like a prisoner of war. I mean, he was very, very thin.
Yeah.
But he had a good arm. And it was a real good first pitch. And I really didn't know anything about him at that time.
Yeah.
Our coach, Jake Klein, who he had played for, turned around and said to our team, "That's a real American hero right there."
Wow.
And so that was really the first time I laid eyes on him. Now you have to fast forward a few years, and I went through law school, and Joe became the controller of the city of South Bend under Mayor Parent, and I was a deputy prosecuting attorney. So we were in the building a lot.
God.
I was going to the 14th I was going to the 10th floor, and he was going to the 14th floor.
Yeah.
But we would strike up a conversation every now and then. And I also was playing softball, and Joe played on a different team than ours. And we all thought Joe was a little bit of a whiner as a player, in the sense that he was always all over the umpires, and it was relentless. So we didn't have a very high regard for Joe during the softball season.
So,
but he knew me from that,
yeah,
and he knew me that I worked for Mike Barnes, and he and Mike Barnes were very close. And when he ran for mayor, I supported him and volunteered, on the phones and whatnot. So I knew him a little bit as a result of that. And then when he won the election, he asked me to be a city attorney.
Wow. And so you guys played for the same baseball coach then, Klein?
Right. He played for Coach Klein. Coach Klein coached from like the late 30s to the middle 70s. So he had quite a tenure at Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually went to school with Newt Rockne.
Wow.
So my baseball coach had ties to Newt Rockne.
That's nuts. Yeah. We just went to the History Museum yesterday and checked out Newt Rockne's exhibit there. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Really cool. Yep. Well, speaking of Joe being elected mayor, he was mayor for about a decade, from 87 to 97. We'll talk a little bit about those years in general. What kind of mayor was Joe in the building? Was he like a details guy, a bigger picture guy? What kind of a guy was he?
He was both.
Okay.
One of his absolute strengths was to look at an issue, and be able to see the big picture. There's lots of times when you're trying to make a decision or trying to sell things to the public or to the council or whatever, got to know the big picture.
Yes.
Okay. And once your constituents have the big picture, then you can fill in the details.
Got it.
And he was outstanding at both.
Got it.
And from large to small, he was hands-on.
Yes. Yeah.
He lets you do your job. But and you might think I really know a lot about this issue. Well, he knew every bit as much about the issue as you did.
And that's important, somebody leading you.
Well, that's right. And so his type of leadership made his department heads, of one of which was me, not want to let him down.
Absolutely.
We believed in him.
Yep.
He believed in us. Leadership's two-way street.
Absolutely.
He backed us up. He made sure that we understood the guardrails. When he would address we had a department head meeting every Monday morning at 7:30, and he would make sure that all the department heads knew if there's a legal question, that's Dick Nussbaum's area.
Yeah.
If there's a financial question, that at the time that's Katie Humphrey's area. She was the controller. And if it was a public works issue, John Lashinsky, that's his. So we all knew where we were supposed to be, and we all respected each other.
Yes.
And I think we all respected each other because Joe respected us.
Absolutely.
And we just had the strongest motivation to never let him down, and to do a better job than he was expecting of us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's neat. I kind of got goosebumps just thinking of that. That's the type of person you want to work for sure. During those years, what would you say you spent most of your time as a city attorney doing?
Well, it was a great job. And one of the reasons why it's such a great job is you do a lot of different things.
Got it.
So I might be in a meeting about a major construction project like the wastewater treatment plant. We had the largest expansion of the wastewater treatment plant in the late 80s. In the history of South Bend, I'm sure they've surpassed that.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal. And so I would be in a meeting with regard to that issue, come to my office, and then there would be a it used to be the little pink things where you had to call people back. We didn't have email and all that stuff.
Messages, yeah.
So I'd have to call someone back, and
Yeah.
it's because their neighbor's dog was barking too loud. So you dealt with a lot of issues. I mean, we represented the city
Yeah.
when the city got sued.
Okay.
We represented the city when the city had big projects that were going on, like the Hall of Fame. We represented the city in its relationship with the then South Bend White Sox.
Yep.
So it was a lot of different things. I would say early on, the South Bend White Sox took up a lot of my time.
Right.
Because it was brand new.
Absolutely.
We came into office after the stadium was built, and actually we were 4 months away from opening day. So, and there was a lot of work that had to be done during those 4 months, both legally and practically.
Yeah.
And so early on, that was, and that that was kind of right up my alley. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, you're a couple of your passions right there: sports, baseball, for sure.
Right.
Definitely. What you kind of mentioned a typical day for you? Just give us a snapshot of a typical day in general in the Kernan's mayor office. What are some type of different problems that might have come across his desk?
Well, he would get in early,
Okay.
and I think he would have a schedule that day. And I would say 100 times out of 100, that schedule had to change because one of the things about being mayor is that, you're responsible for everything.
Right.
And so if something happens, good or bad, you've got to be involved in it. So he had to be available. So his days were from the time he got into the office till the time he went to bed at night, because it just, he always had his home phone number in the directory. So people could call him at home.
Yes.
He was dealing with issues that faced the citizens of South Bend.
Speaking of issues, when he was weighing a tough decision, talk a little bit about his process and what that looked like.
Well, he had a lot of strengths. Okay, and
Okay.
I've already talked about a few of them. But his decision-making process was very important to him.
Yeah.
Was incredible. And what do I mean by that? He had to make the decision. So there was a point in time we had to kick everybody out of the room.
Yep.
And he had to go yay or nay at some point. But before that, he had a lot of people that he would get advice from. And I had an opportunity to see that when he was mayor, when he was lieutenant governor, and when he was governor. And probably the most important decision he ever made was when he was governor, and he had to decide whether a death row inmate was going to be executed.
Wow.
So he had the life of a human being on the line. In that process that he went through, there was, of course, internal discussions. I was involved, but there are lots of people involved. But he also went outside of the government, so to speak.
Yep.
And in that particular instance, he spoke to Monk Malloy.
Okay. Yeah.
He spoke to Father Hesper. He spoke to, at that time, Father Dave Link. He used to be dean of the law school. And he every issue that he had of any importance, that was his process, to bring as many people in, to get as many viewpoints as possible. And then he would go off and make his own decision. Make the decision for all of us, because he was mayor, lieutenant governor, governor. But sometimes you're accountable to make those decisions, and he welcomed that. He was very good at it.
Yep. And the buck stopped at his desk, but he took survey. He got everybody's input and feedback first before acting rash.
There was never a gut reaction with Joe Kernan. Okay, he always was very thoughtful.
Yep.
Very deliberate. And I would say 99.9 times out of 100, he was right.
We'll take a break here to thank one of our sponsors, the Portage Township Trustee Office. If you're not familiar with the work of the trustee's office, this is one of those local government offices that quietly but critically supports our community every single day. From emergency assistance and housing support to food programs and help for neighbors who are facing tough times, the Portage Township Trustee Office exists to make sure people don't fall through the cracks. Trustee Jason Critchlow and his team are consistently fighting for the needs of Portage Township residents. And it's not just talk, folks. Jason does a great job of helping us understand what's happening right now, what current events are actually affecting us locally, and what we can do about them. He's transparent, communicative, and deeply invested in educating the community he serves. What I especially appreciate about Jason is that he doesn't just stay local. He frequently travels to the State House to advocate directly for Portage Township residents, making sure our voices are heard at the state level. So if you or someone you know needs assistance, or if you simply want to better understand the resources available in our community, I encourage you to check out portagetownship.com or follow the Portage Township Trustee Office on Facebook. There's a ton of helpful and timely information there. A huge thanks to Jason and his entire team for the work that they do and for supporting Round the Bend now and then. Local stories and local services like this are what help keep our community strong. During your time in the city's administration in South Bend, what would you say was the hardest part of that era for the city in general? Like city finances, crime, just what would you say would be the hardest from that time?
Those were two big issues. But when we came into office, January 1, 1988, we inherited the budget from the prior administration, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm going to criticize in any way, shape, or form Mayor Parent's administration. He did a great job. All right.
Yep.
But you can't solve everything. All right. So the next guy in has got to pick up the slack at that point. Well, the state has to certify your budget.
Okay.
And they came back to South Bend and said, you've overestimated revenue.
Okay.
So you have to cut your budget by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So literally one of the first meetings right off the bat, we were required to cut 10% out of our budgets.
Wow.
I'd never been through a budgeting process at all. And I had a fairly small budget.
Right.
The the Public Works Department, Police Department, Fire Department. And frankly, the Police Department, the Fire Department were given a lot more leeway and cuts than anyone else. But finances, we were playing catch up at the beginning.
Yeah.
Now our bond rating was down, but we fought through the first couple of years to get our bond rating up, which is important because when you borrow money, when every city borrows money. When you borrow money, your bond rating dictates the rate you pay.
Right.
And a difference of half a point can mean millions of dollars over the bond issue's life.
Yep.
So that was we also were faced with some mandates. That happens a lot. When you're at the local level, all of it rolls down to you from the federal to the state to the local.
That it does.
And there were EPA issues, clean water issues. Wastewater overflow. And that was an issue that faced many mayors. At Joe being one of them and others following him. But like I mentioned earlier, we had a $25 million wastewater treatment plant renovation, which was going to help address some of those issues. And so that was a complicated project, but it was something we had to do.
Had to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And crime.
Yeah.
Crime is tough.
Absolutely.
We're not a big city, but we do have some big city problems. The city of South Bend is a lot different now than it was then.
Right.
You drive down West Washington Street now and you see how nice it's been revitalized, and wasn't like that.
No, it wasn't.
Back in our day.
The block.
Yeah, and it was nasty.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, as a prosecutor, deputy prosecutor, I dealt with that.
Wow.
But when you're in the mayor's office, the police department's under you.
Yep.
And so he always had a very close relationship with his chiefs of police. His first chief was Chief Chuck Hurley. who was, in my view, probably the best chief of police we've ever had. We've got a really good one right now in Scott Ruskowski, but Chuck was special.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame stole him away from us. He went out and worked at Notre Dame then. But his successors always had a really good relationship with Joe. That was an interesting dynamic because generally they weren't bringing good news to the mayor.
Correct. Yeah, they're not bringing cookies and cake and coffee every time.
No, and if anybody woke him up in the middle of the night more than the chief of police, I don't know who that would be.
Right.
We also had, you might remember this, the Morningside fire.
Yes. Across from Central High School, if I recall.
Yeah,
correct?
Which there was a fatality there, and that was the beginning of the homeless center.
Okay.
So the homeless center opened during his administration, during Joe's administration.
Displaced folks from the Morningside Hotel?
Folks went there. Yes, that was the primary place. And, it was just gearing up, all right?
Yeah.
This was not
what it is now or anything.
Well, no, not even close.
Right.
It was not planned to open that day. This was,
I got it.
I think it was in December of 88. So it's within the first year. Now, it was a horrible thing to have happen, but it was, I think, a catalyst for, a great institution that we have now, the Center for the Homeless. But it also was a way that the city and Notre Dame collaborated.
Yes.
Because that would not have happened without Notre Dame. I mentioned Father Dave Link, who at that time he wasn't a priest, he was working at the university, and one of his projects was the homeless center.
Okay.
He and Darcy Chisholm were kind of the private sector founders of that. So that brought a lot of attention on the homeless issue, and so fairly quickly we had, the best homeless center program in the country, in my opinion. And that was because there was a lot of collaboration between Notre Dame and the community.
Right. And a lot of those city issues, they're not independent in their own isolated silos. I mean, the police, the crime, homelessness, money, they're all interwoven and connected.
Yeah, I mean, you've got people calling the mayor's office that don't have anywhere to live and nothing to eat.
Yeah.
And they expect you to help them.
Yeah.
And Joe, over his time, had some great people that worked for him in that area. Jack Reed was one, and Jim Caldwell was another. And these guys were saints.
Yeah.
And that they would fix problems like that every single day.
Wow. It's obviously hard to tell the story of Joe Kernan without the College Football Hall of Fame. And to our listeners, we're going to dedicate an entire episode to that story. So we're not going to get too deep into it here. But just in general, what does that whole saga reveal about Joe as a leader and how he approached big, high-risk decisions for the city?
Well, in my opinion, that was one of his greatest accomplishments. And I know there's a lot of people that might disagree with me on that, and I'm glad you're going to allow me in another episode to further explain that. But the Hall of Fame in South Bend wasn't Joe Kernan's idea.
Right.
He was approached by the local chapter, the Moose Krause chapter of the National Football Foundation, who was an organization that, for want of a better term, owned the Hall of Fame.
Got it.
They developed the Hall of Fame. They selected the members.
Yeah.
And they had local chapters all over the country, and the Moose Krause chapter here was one of the biggest ones.
Okay.
And best run. And so they sent out they being the National Football Foundation, were looking for a home because the first few homes that they went through, the last one being in Kings Island, had just bombed.
Yeah, failed. Yeah.
And so they really, to their credit, they really wanted to do it right.
Yeah.
And so the Moose Krause chapter traipsed up to Joe's 14th floor office and said, "Look, we have this opportunity. We'll help. Let's go for it."
Yeah.
And Joe thought about it and said, "Why not? Why not in South Bend?"
Yeah.
And so he put a group of people together that were high level folks in the area. Phil Facenda, Pat McMahon, Carl King, and many others. And they went about wooing the
Right.
National Football Foundation, and we were selected over some
Big
very
cities.
large cities like Atlanta and
Yep.
New Orleans, Memphis, Tennessee.
Right.
There was some heavy competition, and the fact of the matter was, we not only beat them, we beat them decisively.
Yeah.
Okay, so and us being selected, it's like in '92 or thereabouts, was an impressive thing for our city.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
Hall of Fame was built on a site. There was a Transpo bus station. So that was certainly an upgrade.
Right.
At
Of
that
course.
point,
Of
at that
course.
point. And of course, there were a number of years where we did very, very well, and then it started going downhill. And the fact of the matter is, we snatched defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah.
We were our own worst enemies,
Got
frankly,
you.
because there were people in our community that undermined it. We were very public about undermining it, and it hurt us.
Yep.
And the truth of the matter was, from the day South Bend was selected as the site of the College Hall of Fame, there were many, many people who were upset with that decision. Didn't want the Hall of Fame to be in South Bend. So there were a lot of factors working against us at that time, which we can go into further detail later on. But that was, in my view, that was not a failure. That was
absolutely
that was an accomplishment that didn't work out the way we wanted it to work out. But I to my dying day, I will argue for the fact that it could have worked out.
And as folks will learn in this episode, there was also a ton of support publicly for the College Football Hall of Fame. It wasn't just the naysayers publicly. There was a lot of support.
No, there was a lot of support, and you might recall some of the enshrinement ceremonies that we had, which generally in August. People from all over the country came to South Bend, and I'll never forget. One of the people was Mike Ditka, and he got up and spoke about how well he was treated here in South Bend.
That's neat.
And he said, "There's no other place in the United States of America for the Hall of Fame except South Bend."
That's neat. Wow, that's cool. That is neat.
We should be very proud of that.
Yep, definitely. And we'll dive more into it. And it is an intriguing story. And we beat Atlanta, New Orleans, and all the other cities. And now, a brief word from one of our sponsors. Your business relies on technology, but technology needs protection. Our managed IT and cybersecurity services act like your own in-house security team, monitoring and defending your systems 24/7. We just don't fix problems, we prevent them. Local service, real experts, real security. Call MT Box Computers today at 574-277-2775 or head to their website to learn more, www.mtboxcomputers.com. A link to the website is in this episode's show notes. Thank you, MT Box Computers, for all of your support of our content. I'm so very appreciative and glad to spread the good word about your work. And now, back to the episode. Moving into Joe becoming lieutenant governor, can you briefly share with our listeners how the opportunity for Joe to become Indiana's lieutenant governor came about?
Well, it's important to remember that the governor at that time was Evan Bayh.
Okay.
And he was serving his second term.
Okay.
So he had to leave. And his lieutenant governor, Frank O'Bannon, was going to run for governor.
Got it.
And Frank wanted Joe.
Okay.
So it's as simple as that.
Really?
Right? Frank wanted Joe. Joe didn't want to leave South Bend.
Yeah.
He just didn't. He felt he had the best job he could ever have. And we mentioned earlier about his decision-making process. Well, I remember sitting around Joe's dining room table over on Pokagon Street, and he had a number of his very close friends. He had some great friends, close friends that he loved and trusted.
Yep.
And I would say the consensus around the room was, don't do it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, don't do it. And I don't think Joe really wanted to do it, Frank O'Bannon talked him into doing it.
Yeah.
And once he talked him into doing it, when Joe made a decision, that was the decision. Here we go.
Right.
I will tell you that I was not happy about that because the relationship that we had and how well things worked out. He was going to leave South Bend. I just and I, for my friend Joe Kernan, I didn't know that was the best decision.
Right.
And then on top of that, he comes down to my office and tells me that he's stealing my chief deputy city attorney, Jenny Manurer.
Joe.
And he took her down and she became lieutenant governor's general counsel. So that was the thing that hurt the most, okay?
Because you had a good person, and when you lose a good person, it
she's
hurts.
the best person, okay? And she, I had to bring my A game because she cleaned up my messes more than you want to know. But and then he won, okay?
Yeah.
He and Frank won, and just like everything else that he did, we went into it 150%, and he was an outstanding lieutenant governor.
Yeah, for sure. What was did you still have a professional working relationship with him as a lieutenant governor, or just more friendship?
I did not have a professional relationship with him at lieutenant governor until I remember Jenny Manurer went down and was the counsel, but she became a Superior Court judge.
Okay.
So that position opened up. And in 1998, Joe asked me to be his general counsel down in Indianapolis. And I didn't go down there full time. I still maintain my private practice, but I was down in Indianapolis fairly regularly. And that was a whole new world of issues and a bigger platform of issues.
Definitely.
But it was the same Joe Kernan.
Yeah.
And I was really happy to be able to work with him under those circumstances.
Yeah. Working with him here locally in South Bend, and then going down to state and seeing it in a different lens. Same Joe, different lens, different purview.
Right.
It's obviously a very heavy moment in the state when a governor passes away. But as Joe's longtime friend, what were you kind of feeling when Governor Bannon passed away? Then he's governor.
I can tell you exactly what I was feeling. It was we were at a party at the Downs household over on Esther Street. And Joe was part of a group. I was not part of this group. Joe had a lot of different friends.
Yeah.
But they had, I forget what, they had their own Ryder Cup.
Got it.
So there were Irish individuals who came over here and played.
Wow.
And they went over to Ireland and played there. Well, this in that particular year, they were here.
Okay.
And they were at that party.
Yeah.
And so Joe was going to be going and it was over Labor Day. And I think it was Labor Day Monday. He was going to leave and go to Chicago because Governor O'Bannon was leading a delegation from the state of Indiana for an economic development conference. And so I went to work that Tuesday morning. About 8:30, I got a call from Tom McKenna, who was at that time was head of the Department of Commerce for the state, and told me that Governor O'Bannon had suffered a very serious stroke and they didn't think he was going to make it. And so I'm thinking, you better get a lawyer. And well, I was the lawyer. Okay. So I went and studied the Indiana Constitution as to what happens at that point. And, there was a period of a week to 10 days between the time that Governor O'Bannon had the stroke and the time that he passed.
Got it.
And during that time, there was some degree of, it was kind of a lawyer's dream in a certain sense, because there were some different paths that people were thinking about. You would think that lieutenant governor would automatically become the governor. Well, that was true, but it wasn't necessarily automatic.
Okay.
There was a process by which you had to determine that the governor couldn't, it was pretty obvious that.
Yeah.
And so that process was actually a legislative process.
Okay.
And the legislature petitions the Supreme Court
Mm-hmm.
to declare the governor disabled,
Okay.
and to then the lieutenant governor becomes
Yeah.
governor. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. Okay, that takes time,
Right.
but government doesn't stop.
No. 24/7.
So I got a call early that week that there was a bond issue that was being sold in New York, and it involved highway construction. Important,
Of course.
bond issue. And the governor has to sign the bond.
Wow.
And so the lawyer that was the bond counsel there said to me, "What do we do?"
Right.
And we had a great rate.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
if we waited, we could lose tens of millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the Holy Spirit was very good to me. And what I thought we should do is just go ahead.
Do it.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Joe will sign it. Just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turned out, what we did do, and it was a very collaborative process between the legislature.
Okay.
Pat Bauer at that time was the
Yep.
Speaker of the House. Chief Justice Shepard, who really, really was close with Maggie Kernan more than anybody, because she served on his Judicial Nominating Commission. But he was extremely smart and good.
Yeah.
And they made a decision that this was not an adversarial process, and they were going to work together.
Yep.
And Justice Frank Sullivan from South Bend was involved, and he wrote the Supreme Court opinion on this issue. And how we solved that problem of gap was we asked, and Justice Sullivan was kind enough to insert in the order, that the disability was determined to be from that Monday or Tuesday morning when Frank O'Bannon suffered the stroke. And so Joe became governor, or acting governor.
Right.
And shortly thereafter, we went through all that. Shortly thereafter, he died.
Yeah.
And so the Constitution of Indiana is very clear on what happens then.
Okay. It was just that kind of that when he was debilitated but still alive was kind of that gray area.
You didn't want someone to take over the reins if they had the flu.
Right.
You just, there had to be some sort
Absolutely.
of process. And there were a lot of opinions on what that process should be. And we locked in on a path, and it, in my opinion, was one of the most interesting and I think most rewarding legal issues that I was involved in with many other people. Believe me. Okay.
Right. Collaborative for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And getting to a little bit about him after him being governor, and then just some reflective questions, and then we can wrap it up. I love going to Four Winds Field in the summertime, the Cove. I love taking my family there. I love meeting my friends there. It is a gem in our community.
Well, if you've loved it in the past, you have no idea. I just went through a tour yesterday.
Oh,
all the renovations. It is
I can't wait.
As neat as it was when it opened.
Yeah.
It was an incredible stadium for 1987. Okay?
Right.
This is going to be an incredible stadium for 2026.
I love it.
It's really something. So anyway,
but we wouldn't be here without Joe Kernan. Am I right?
No question about it.
Talk to us.
No question about it. On the one hand, Joe got the benefit of all the bad stuff Mayor Parent and his administration had to go through.
Yep.
I always joke with Joe, Mayor Parent didn't run again because he was very unpopular. And Joe's on the Clydesdales coming through the center field fence for opening day. Okay.
Right.
And so he got the good end of that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there were a lot of problems with the ownership back in the early 2000s.
Yep.
They had kind of just decided that they weren't going to really do anything. They were just going to. It was their cash cow, and they rode it for as long, and they were going to sell it at a premium for someone else to take it out of South Bend.
Right.
And that was a very, very disappointing period.
Absolutely.
Because we had done a lot of really great things for that ownership. So Joe was coming to the end of his term as lieutenant governor, and his plan was to buy the team.
Yeah.
Well, he became governor. Okay, and then he decided to run for governor. So that was put on hold.
Yeah.
And during that time, the team there was an agreement to sell the team that was subject to approval of the minor league and Major League Baseball authorities, and they didn't give the approval to move the team. They gave the approval for somebody to buy it,
but not to move it.
Well, so the guy backed out. Well, at that point, South Bend had to put up or shut up.
Yeah.
Because if we would not have come up with an alternative to keep it in South Bend, it would have got moved.
That is,
and I was president of Midwest League at that time, so I was,
fingers were all in it.
I was all in, and the fact of the matter was, obviously, I didn't want it to move from South.
Absolutely
Bend, okay?
not.
But the overwhelming opinions from the Midwest League and from the president of minor league baseball was, we're not going to move it.
Oh no, they wanted to keep it. Okay,
they wanted
good. I was thinking
no.
Okay.
They were, South Bend was the right location.
Good.
They'd been very good to the Midwest League. They had built a stadium that, frankly, 9 or 10 other teams used as a model so that they could build their stadiums. So South Bend was in a very high regard in baseball. So I, of course, was in that camp. But as I said, we had to put up or shut up in 2005.
Okay.
And Joe put together a group, and they bought the team.
Yeah.
They had to pay a premium to buy the team. And as a result, they really didn't have the capital available to do the kinds of things, because there had been a lot of neglect.
There was.
It was going to require a lot of, and so Joe buying the team was a great community service.
Absolutely.
Every bit as much as I believe as his elected public official service. And then finding Andrew Berlin to buy the team.
Yeah.
Because it was not something that most people would think was a good deal. It was a good investment.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the owners in the Midwest League told Andrew he's never going to make it in South Bend.
Wow.
And Andrew's never forgotten that. But Andrew came in, bought the team. The investors invested because they did it as a public service.
Absolutely.
They all lost money.
Yeah.
Joe lost a lot of money. Joe was at risk for a lot of money. Okay. And he was not a wealthy man.
Yeah. Right.
Joe was a very thrifty guy and, had a little nest egg, and it was a little nest egg.
Right.
But he put that all at risk.
Wow.
And he did that for us.
Yep.
And so we have today one of the greatest facilities in the country with really a terrific owner, and Joe Hart and his team over there. They really know how to do it. We're really lucky here in South Bend. And this year is going to be a banner year out at the ballpark.
I love it. And like you had said, a lot of that, literally all this, the family time, the development around the Cove currently would not be here unless Joe and his team didn't buy it.
Let's just think about this, okay? And this is a little bit of inside baseball. But there is a state statute that's called the Professional Sports and Convention Development Fund Statute Act. And you're eligible for state money.
Okay.
But you're only eligible for state money if you have a professional sports team.
Okay.
Who plays in a facility owned by the city.
Yep.
So we qualified for that.
Okay.
And since 1997, we have benefited from that to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. So the $10 million that was spent by taxpayers to build the stadium has been returned many times over in cash.
Wow.
Okay, this is not economic,
Yeah.
economic. This is in cash
Hard
money
cash.
that came, and in fact, the last we raised the cap for that up to 5 million, and we're in the third year of that, and we've hit the cap.
Wow.
So the last 2 years, we've gotten the $10 million back in the last 2 years, and that's helping to fund not only the renovation at the stadium, but is also was a major contributor to the Morse. And it's in what
the addition there.
what just opened
Yeah.
the other day, grand opening.
Wow.
There's $1 million a year that comes out of that fund that goes to the Morse.
That's it. Well, yeah.
So yes, it does benefit baseball, but it also benefits other things.
Our whole city, our whole community,
Right.
the region.
Right.
Wow.
And if we don't have a professional baseball team,
Yeah, we don't have
doesn't happen.
No,
Okay,
it doesn't. It doesn't.
so
Wow.
you tell me what that's worth. Okay, and
Priceless.
and Joe Kernan put his life on the line to do that.
Yeah. Wow. And just a few reflective questions just to sum up, Joe, and I think just the story you just told kind of does sum it up, but what if you take a step back and you just, look at Joe's years here, what do you believe his true legacy is?
Well, Joe was a great leader.
Uh-huh.
He was a statesman.
Okay.
What does that mean? That means that once he became mayor,
Yeah.
everybody was his customer. He liked to talk in terms of customers.
Yeah.
And so whether you voted for him or not, that didn't matter. Whether you were a wealthy person or not, that didn't matter.
Yep.
Joe was going to do his best for everybody.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think that's true these days.
No.
And I think Joe would be very upset with what's going on because that's just not the way he did business.
Right. What are you most proud of in your decades working with him?
Well, I learned so much from him. I've had two great mentors in my career, Mike Barnes in the prosecutor's office and Joe Kernan. They taught me what public service is all about. You don't have to hold public office to.
Got it.
Yep. I never won an election. I was always in the background, but even today, as a private citizen, I don't have any public titles to my name, but there's always ways that you can perform public service.
Yeah.
And many people do that. And that's one of the great things about this community.
Yep.
And to treat people with respect.
Yeah. Yep.
That's his legacy.
Yep. I love it. Well, hey, thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your memories of Joe. And I hope that our listeners can just get a sense of how much he meant to our community.
Well, he meant a great deal to our community, and I'll tell you, he meant a great deal to me.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Round the Bend Now and Then. An extra special thanks to Dick Nussbaum for sharing your memories of Joe Kernan. Join us again next time as we learn more about South Bend and Mishawaka's Now and Then.